My name is Barrie. I'm 57 years old. I spent 31 years running electrical wire through walls in Barrie, Ontario. And in February of last year, I slipped on a patch of black ice at the end of my own driveway and broke my wrist in 2 places. That's the small part of what I'm going to tell you. The part that matters is what happened to my mother while my wrist healed, and what I found in a file folder when I was sitting in my garage at 11 o'clock at night, unable to sleep, going through old bank letters I should have read months earlier. My wife passed in the spring 2 years before all of this. Pancreatic. She was 55. She told me she didn't want that to be the whole story of her, so I won't make it the whole story here. What I'll tell you is that after she died, I was alone in this house, and my mother was alone in hers in Aurelia, and we each pretended to manage better than we did. Then small things started. A pot left on the burner, a bag of groceries left outside overnight in October. She called me 3 times one Tuesday to ask if I'd fed the dog. We've never had a dog, not once in my life. Her doctor gave it a name and I didn't argue with it. We sold the Aurelia house in August and she moved into the spare room by September. I repainted it the same blue it had been in her old bedroom for 40 years. She never mentioned the paint, but she slept better. The Memory Care Day program at the hospital runs Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday mornings, 8:30 to noon. It's covered through Ontario's Home and Community Care. The ride isn't covered. The program is the thing that matters. The nurses have been clear with me about what happens when patients miss sessions. When the brain isn't being worked, when it isn't being sat with and gently pulled forward, it lets go of things faster. Missing 1 is a missed session. Missing 2 starts a slide that's hard to come back from. In 4 years, she hadn't missed one, not once. I drove her in my F-150, parked in the hospital lot with a Tim's and a book I never got more than 40 pages into, drove her home, made lunch, 3 mornings a week for 4 years. She'd sit in the passenger seat and tell me things she remembered. About my father, about a summer she spent near Sundridge in 1971, about the smell of my grandfather's workshop. The details shifted sometimes, but she always told them like they were new, and I always listened like I'd never heard them, because for her, in the way that mattered, she hadn't told me yet. That was the life I had in January. Then February came, and the driveway had a sheet of ice under 2 centimeters of fresh snow, and I went down carrying the recycling bins, and I heard a sound like a branch snapping under a boot. 2 clean fractures in my left wrist. 6 to 8 weeks, no driving. My truck is manual, always has been. I've never regretted the stick shift until that morning at the walk-in clinic, when the doctor said no driving, and I did the math in my head, standing in an exam room that smelled like hand sanitizer and dread. My mother was at the kitchen table when I got home. She looked at the cast and said, "What did you do to yourself?" I told her I slipped on the ice. She said, "I told your father to salt that driveway." I said, "Yes, you did." Before I tell you what came next, I need to tell you something that happened 4 years earlier. 'Cause it matters, and if you don't know it now, the rest of the story won't hold the right weight. 4 years before the February I'm describing, my daughter and her husband were trying to buy their first home. This is Ontario. You know what that means. In the Barrie-Innisfil corridor, in those years, the market wasn't built for young people on 2 regular incomes. They had a down payment and they had their savings, and the bank still came back and said they didn't qualify on their own. Not enough credit history, not enough years in. I co-signed. My lawyer drew up the paperwork. I signed my name as co-signer on a $520,000 mortgage in Innisfil, my credit rating, my income history, my name on the line. The loan was approved that week. They moved in the following month. My daughter cried when she got the keys and held on to me for a long time in the empty living room. I did not tell her that co-signing meant my own debt-to-income ratio had shifted enough that I couldn't get a new line of credit for nearly 2 years. I didn't bring it up when they renovated the bathroom, or when my son-in-law traded in his car for a better one, or at any Christmas. I just signed, because that's what you do for your daughter. My name was still on that mortgage 4 years later. Now Tuesday morning, 9 days after the ice. My daughter was in Sudbury for work. She's in project management. She travels. I called my son-in-law at 8 in the morning. He works in IT, from home 3 days a week. I kept it short. My wrist. My mother's program at 9. Could he drive her? It's 35 minutes, round trip door to door. She's done the drop-off hundreds of times. She knows the way in from the entrance. He said, "Barrie, she's not my gran. I've got to stand up at 9. I said, your stand-up is Thursday. Today is Tuesday. A pause. Short. He said still, look, it's not my circus, all right? It's not my responsibility. You know what I mean? I knew exactly what he meant. What I didn't know until my daughter called me that evening was that he'd had a Teams call running with his mic open. 6 of his coworkers were on the line when he said it. Every word. I ordered a cab on my phone. The cab came 20 minutes late. My mother sat on the front step in her winter coat and her good scarf and her green mittens, her program bag on her lap, ready at 8:15 because she didn't want to make anyone wait. She'd been sitting outside in February in Barrie for 40 minutes by the time the cab arrived. The fare was $47 one way. 3 mornings a week, both directions. That's over 280s a week. I had 5 more weeks of recovery. I had the money. That isn't the point. The point is what happened 3 weeks in. On a Thursday morning at 8:40, the app couldn't find a driver in my area. I tried 4 times. I called the accessible transit line the hospital had given me at intake. 6 to 8 weeks for authorization. And even then, the vans ran on their own schedule, not the clinic's. I called a neighbor. No answer. I called the friend who lives closest. He was already in Angus, 40 minutes out. My mother sat on the front step for an hour. She missed the session. That afternoon she was quiet in a way I didn't recognize. Not the comfortable quiet she sometimes settled into. A different kind entirely. She kept looking at the window. At dinner she asked me when my wife was coming home. I said soon. She nodded. She ate half her soup and left the rest. I want to stop here for a moment. If you've had a parent go through this, if you've watched someone who used to be the whole structure of your life start to lose the shape of things, you know what it costs to sit across a dinner table from them in the quiet. You know what it costs to say soon when there is no soon. If you've ever said that word to someone who needed to hear it, even though it wasn't true, type it in the comments. Just that one word. I'll read everyone. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do, because what comes after this took 3 months, and I've never told it all at once to anyone until right now. The following Tuesday she fell. Not at the program, at home. Getting up from the kitchen table to fill her glass, something she'd done 10,000 times. I heard it from the hallway, a single hard sound against the cabinet. I got to her in under 4 seconds. Her hip was bruised, and she had a cut above her eyebrow that needed taping. Not badly hurt, but I put her in the truck anyway and drove with my cast on, my jaw set, and my eyes on the road. Because a fall in a person her age, with her condition, is never only a fall. They kept her 2 nights for observation. I slept in the chair beside her bed. She woke up once around 3 in the morning and looked at me and said, "You look tired, Barrie." I said I was fine. She patted my hand and went back to sleep. At discharge, one of the nurses pulled me into the hallway. She said she was going to be straight with me. Consistency matters. Missing sessions causes regression. She'd been missing sessions. She said, "Where is your family in this?" I didn't have anything to say to that, so I didn't say anything. 3 days after we got home, I was going through old mail in my home office because I needed something to do with my hands that wasn't sitting still. At the back of the bottom drawer, I found a file folder. I'd set it there in the fall when a letter from the bank came, and I'd meant to read it. And then my mother had a difficult week. I forgot, and then I forgot again. I opened it. It was a HELOC application. Home equity line of credit. $85,000, secured against the Innisfil property. My name was on the cover letter because I was still co-signer on the original mortgage. I started reading the schedule of assets. My truck was on page 2. A 2019 Ford F-150 silver registered to Barrie. My name, my plate, my registration, listed under household assets. Declared value, $29,500. My son-in-law had been using the truck on weekends for 2 years. I'd told him he could borrow it when he needed to haul gear for his son's hockey team. I added him to my insurance as a secondary driver because it was cheaper that way. I'd been paying the premiums on his driving since I said yes. He listed it as owned, not borrowed, owned. I kept reading. Page 3. A set of my electrical tools, Milwaukee drill set, conduit bender, 2 panel boxes, commercial grade cable, stored in their garage since the summer I cleaned out my workshop between jobs. My receipts, my tools, listed in the HELOC, filing as equipment, household value $8,200. I read the whole document twice. Then I set it on the desk and sat there in the dark for a while without moving. In the morning I called my lawyer. He's been my lawyer since 2004, and he has the gift of delivering hard facts without wrapping them in sympathy, which I've come to understand is one of the most decent things a person can do. He listened to what I described, then he was quiet for a moment, the way he gets when he's organizing. The truck was mine, registered and insured in my name. My son-in-law was a secondary driver on a policy I owned. That's permission, not ownership. Permission granted. Permission revocable. The tools were mine, the receipts were in my name, and that's what determined it. The cosigner status on the mortgage was mine to remove. Removing myself wouldn't automatically void the mortgage, but it would trigger a full bank review. My son-in-law would need to qualify on his own record. He paused before he said the last part. Barrie. A person cannot list another man's registered vehicle on their own loan application as a household asset. I said I know. There's a name for what that is. I know, I said. That Saturday evening, his post appeared in the neighborhood Facebook group. 600 members. 600 people who knew him, liked his deck, had drinks at his place. Deck reveal party, Sunday at 2, burgers on, beer cold, bring whoever. In the photo, my truck was in the driveway, the little Canadian flag air freshener my wife bought at a gas station in 2018 as a joke was visible through the windshield. He'd invited me. My daughter would be home by then. She hadn't known about the HELOC application. I was certain of that. She wouldn't have let it happen. I also knew that my son-in-law had mentioned more than once that his mortgage broker had become a real friend, that she came around socially sometimes. I had my lawyer prepare a letter that week. 3 options. Option A. My son-in-law drives my mother to her program on Tuesday and Thursday mornings for the next 4 weeks while I finish recovery. I remain cosigner. I sign the HELOC. The tools stay in the garage. Option B. They purchase the truck at fair market value, $27,500, no interest, 36 months. I begin the process of removing my name from the mortgage. They re-qualify without me. Option C. The truck comes back to my driveway within 14 days. The tools are collected by me. My name is removed from the mortgage filing. The HELOC does not proceed in its current form. Response required by Friday at 5 o'clock. Friday came, 5 o'clock came, nothing. On Sunday at 2:05, I came through their side gate into the backyard. New composite deck, clean joinery, good wood, a built-in bench along the railing. The kind of deck my wife would have liked to sit on in July with a glass of wine. About 30 people, neighbors, colleagues, a few faces I recognized. Burgers on the gas grill, a keg of Molson on ice. Jazz from a Bluetooth speaker on the deck railing. My truck in the driveway. My wife's little flag in the window. My daughter came to me immediately. She saw the folder in my hand, and her face did something she was trying to control. I said, I'm not here to make a scene. I came because I was invited, and because there's something in here that you should see before anyone else shows it to you. Across the yard, the mortgage broker was holding a beer and talking to a couple near the garden. She was a licensed professional with the Financial Services Regulatory Authority of Ontario. She'd sent paperwork to my address because my name was on the file. I walked over. I introduced myself. She knew the name from the paperwork. I handed her the truck registration. I said, Page 2 of the asset schedule, and the vehicle registration. I think you need to look at both. She read the registration. She looked at me. She read it again. She set her beer on the railing and didn't pick it up again. I didn't say anything more to her. I walked back to where my daughter was standing, just inside the sliding door, with the folder open in her hands. Her face had gone the kind of still I recognized from her mother, the kind of still that holds something very big very carefully. She said, He listed your truck as their asset. I said, Yes. He listed your tools. Yes. He didn't tell me any of this. I know. The broker crossed the yard in under 90 seconds. She put her hand on my son-in-law's arm and pulled him toward the far corner, near the fence. I kept my distance deliberately. I watched his face from across the deck. I didn't need to hear the words. When a man who's been building on someone else's foundation finally understands whose name is on the deed, there's a specific thing that happens to his face. I've seen it once before in 30 years of doing business. I recognized it. He looked across the yard at me. His mouth started to open. I gave you until Friday, I said, from where I stood. 3 options. You didn't take one. My daughter walked to the middle of the deck. I'd like everyone to head home, she said, not loudly. The way her mother used to say things when she was absolutely certain she wasn't going to repeat herself. The deck emptied in 11 minutes. The broker left without shaking his hand. My son-in-law went inside. The jazz kept playing on the Bluetooth speaker because nobody thought to turn it off, and it played into the empty yard while the neighbors filed out through the side gate, 1 and 2 at a time. That night he posted in the neighborhood group. He wrote that I was weaponizing an old co-signing arrangement to bully his family, that I was threatening their home over a misunderstanding about a vehicle I'd given them years ago, that I was being manipulative, that his wife, my daughter, was in tears. He had 61 comments in the first 3 hours, people who knew him and liked him and had eaten his burgers that afternoon. I read every comment, I didn't respond to one. At 7:22 in the morning, a new comment appeared. One line, no punctuation beyond a period. From the home care coordinator who has been visiting the house on file twice a month since my wife passed. She wrote, I was at their home 6 weeks ago on a Tuesday morning. His mother was sitting on the front step in her coat and mittens in February, waiting for a cab that was 20 minutes late because her ride to her program had fallen through. I have been doing this work for 23 years. I'll leave it there. The post had 61 comments before that line. After that line, it had 61 comments. Not one more, not a reaction, not a reply. 600 people in that group, and every single one of them looked at what she wrote and closed the app. He deleted the post by Wednesday morning. My daughter stayed with a friend for 5 months. She went back to the house in Innisfil in the summer. That's between her and her husband, and I don't pull at it. Some things belong to people, and the most honest thing a parent can do is stay available and stay out of the way. But in March, before she went back, she came with me on a Tuesday. My wrist had healed by then. I was driving again. I didn't need her to come. She came anyway. The 3 of us drove to the hospital together. My mother sat in the back seat and told us about the summer she spent near Sundridge in 1971, which she's told me many times. My daughter had never heard it. She listened without interrupting, all the way to the drop-off. In the parking lot, I turned the engine off and handed my daughter the keys. She looked at them for a moment. I'd had the transfer of title prepared the week before. The truck was in her name now, her name alone, not a household asset, not borrowed, hers. She didn't speak right away. We sat in the parking lot while my mother went inside on her own because she knows the way in. She's always known the way. My daughter finally said, Dad, why didn't you tell me? About the mortgage, about the cosign, about what it cost you. I'd been thinking about that question for 3 months. Because it wasn't a loan, I said. It was a gift. You don't attach conditions to a gift after you've given it. You just have to trust that you gave it to the right person. She looked at the keys in her hand. She drives her grandmother on Tuesdays now, and Thursdays. She rearranged her schedule. My mother doesn't always know what day it is, but she knows when it's the right person in the seat beside her. She calls my daughter the girl, which is what she's called her since she was 5, and she says it every time with the same quiet warmth, as though she's just thought of it and is glad she did. I stand in my driveway on Tuesday mornings and watch the truck back out onto the street. I go inside and make a second cup of coffee and sit at the kitchen table for a while. My son-in-law is no longer on the mortgage. My tools came home in April. The HELOC never went through. The Innisfil house is still in their names. What happens to that marriage is not mine to hold. I have a note taped above my workbench. I wrote it on graph paper from a notepad my wife left in the office drawer. I wrote it after all of this was done, sitting alone in the garage at night, trying to put the whole thing into one thought. It says, what you give without witness is still yours until you sign it away. I believed for a long time that giving quietly, without keeping score, without announcing yourself, without asking for credit, was the purest kind. I still believe that. But I learned something in a file folder at 11 o'clock on a February night, with a cast on my wrist and the light on, and the rest of the garage dark around me. Quiet giving is only safe when it lands somewhere honest. When it doesn't, all that silence just becomes a story someone else tells about what was always theirs. I don't give my son-in-law anything now. Not a signature, not a truck, not an afternoon, not my name on a document. I don't feel guilty about that. That took longer to come to than I'll admit. I thought if I stopped giving, I'd become something I didn't want to be. Cold, small, the kind of man who keeps score. What I understand now is that keeping score and knowing when to stop are two entirely different things. Nobody teaches you that distinction. Not in the trades, not in church, not anywhere I've ever found. You work it out in a garage at 11 at night, with old bank letters in your lap, while the overhead light hums and your mother sleeps upstairs, and you finally sit still long enough to see clearly what you've been looking away from. Last Tuesday, my mother asked me if I'd eaten breakfast. I told her yes. She said good. She said I looked like my father when I didn't shave. She said it the way she says all of it, like she's just had the thought and it pleased her, like it's the first time, and it's good news.